I came down with these 5 things that people talk about. And so I'm going, okay, it's people, experiences, assets, creations, expressions of kindness. And I'm going, wait. People, experiences, assets, creations, expressions of kindness, spells peace. And I'm going, okay, I got to write a book.
He just wrote a book on creating your legacy. Welcome to podcast number 2.
Wow.
With Marcum Davis.
So cool.
So I want to introduce you all to Marcum Davis.
Wow.
He is a friend of mine for how many years now?
Oh, probably at least 10.
10 years, some in that range.
Yeah.
We met at that event in Vegas, right?
Oh, that's right.
With
That's
Peter.
where it started.
Yeah, we both spoke on a stage, and then it kind of went from there.
Yeah.
So
It's been joy. You know, actually, we'll get into the book later, but there's only 2 people I mentioned in the book as thanking for being part of my life journey. It was you and Dr. Glover. But
it's awesome because we got Dr. Glover coming on later this week.
That's cool. But it was funny as I was recounting all the places in the world we've been together. You know, I couch surfed with you in Bucharest. Yeah. We spoke together Miami twice, Istanbul, been to your place, L.A., Bozeman,
Montana.
Yeah. Now we're out here in Austin. It's just cool, brother.
Yeah.
Listen, I just
that was a life I designed when I was training with David Nagel. He would travel all over the world with his staff, and they would just have adventures together while they taught workshops. And I was like, I want that life.
Entrepreneurship, you know, it is fun. It's a lot. It's really fun.
Like I've never been to Austin before till this month, right?
Oh, wow.
Here I am, and I come out here, and I've got 1 million friends in Austin because I met them all over the world, and they all live in Austin. Yeah. And I'm like, I feel like I know everybody, you know, and it's pretty amazing. But what I want to do real quick is just so you guys know, Marcum, as you know, is a great friend of mine. Marcum has had a crazy life. Yeah. A lot of ups and downs. You're responsible for how many marriages? Yeah.
Well, as far as the ups and downs go, there's so many stories in my journey. When I was in my 30s, I broke out of the cubicle life and had started my own business. Mm-hmm. And then the 2008 crash took all that away. I had 4 years to spend at Paramount. And then I started this men's coaching thing that turned it into a matchmaking business that was just marriage focused. And because I had love interest in Ukraine. And so we would do these elegant dinners, these meet and greet events, and only with people who are really serious. And it was amazing because we did create more than 450 marriages in those 12 years, 52 babies born and all that stuff. Very rewarding. You know, I think about that, you know, it's like, is the next, Steve Jobs or whoever among all those we helped put together. So a little bit of a legacy, piece there. And then, of course, and I'm just teeing this up so you can go anywhere you want with it. At the same time, and I lived in Ukraine for most of the past decade, and I have a nonprofit, Abundance International. We were always giving to orphanages there. And, of course, the invasion happened, and then the need really became big. So there's the short life story.
Well, that's what I was about to do. I was about to say, like, the way I see your life, businessman that lost everything, rebuilt everything, became a men's coach, was responsible for over 450 marriages with very few divorces, then created a charity that helped all these children in Ukraine. And then when the Ukraine war hit, here's this man behind the lines during the war, getting medical supplies, money, and food to all these children that need food. And then rebuilding your life again and building this legacy brand where you're teaching men how to really, really go out there and leave a legacy, not just out of pride and ego, but so that they can leave something behind for future generations. And that's why I really wanted to have you on the call today. At some point we'll talk about that. We'll talk about legacy. We'll talk about your book, Legacy, which is in Barnes & Noble now, I believe. Yeah.
Everywhere. It's just everywhere books are sold.
Mug,
there you go, right? Bringing gifts, always bringing gifts.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and so when I got to Austin, I was like, well, shoot, you're not far away. We gotta talk. Right. And I got to go from here. So let's dive back in. You were a big real estate guy at one point, right? In the beginning.
Oh yeah, in the 2000s.
Yeah. So what I really want to focus on for you guys out there and for Marcum, just to set the tone, is this idea of what is the hero's journey and what is it to stay resilient, top of the emotional scale, up in courage, acceptance, love, peace. If you crash, get back up there. What is it to get back up there? And how does that create success? How does that build you as a man, as a woman, as a person? How does that help us to create a powerful life where we give back? And you've been through some ups and downs. And so you made, I'd love to hear about that. You made millions in real estate and then lost it all in 2008. And I'm always very curious, when somebody goes through that, what's the mindset of the person that,
That set a foundation for everything. And, you know, and a lot of people made a lot of money in the 2000s and lost it all in the crash. So I'm not alone in that. But as a framework to lessons learned in life and in the book, when most of my life, my dad was a pastor, so he'd only made middle income. You know, we're middle income family. But you don't get into pastorate to make a lot of money. So for me, when I had the first opportunity to start my own business, and which was out of necessity, my second wife, we were expecting, she was a young attorney, and so she was making as much as I was, and I was just a cubicle sales guy, you know, for a printing company. And so we realized if I wanted her to stay home, I had to double my income in like 8 months, or we were screwed. And so there's a whole story in the book about how I did that, and I got my several six-figure offers. And one of them was to start a distributorship for this publicly held company. They front-loaded me $100,000 and basically gave me the state of California, and I took it from $1 million to over $5 million. And I lived lavishly during the 2000s. I'll put it that way, which was like, you know, a kid in a candy store, right? I never grew up with this stuff, so I'm traveling. I got my Mercedes convertible and my Jaguar in this 5,500 square foot house. It was the brand new model in the model home series, and ego out the wazoo, because everywhere.
The young entrepreneur. I've done it. It's never going to fail again.
But you realize when you haven't had it, and then you build your identity, your framework around that, and the ego food you get all the time. Then when you lose it, it's pretty devastating, because everything's taken away. And after losing it took about 2 years to lose everything. After the income stopped, the company I repped went out of business. They're gone. And then when the money crashed, one by one I lost the assets. Finally, the only thing I had left after losing the house was to start all over and move to LA. And I lived in my parents' condo because that's all I could get. I still had no income, you know. And so at that point, the funny story in the book is that my parents were Disney fans. My mom worked there while my dad was doing his thing, and the whole place was like a shrine to Disney. And I couldn't touch it because it wasn't my place. So it was a little bit crazy. Love you, Mom, but it was a little psycho. And
so you're living there with your young wife, right?
Yeah. And my son, who was a teenager at the time, and I worked at Paramount.
When I say young wife, you had a new wife at that time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was crazy was trying to make money, trying to make things go. I had a friend named Rick contacted me the day I actually was moving, packing boxes out of my great house to move to my parents' condo, and I said, this isn't a good time. So he calls me back on Christmas Day, and he wanted to do a documentary with me because he liked my story, liked the book I told a little bit about.
This is the story on the crash.
Romancing. About Ukraine.
The international dating book.
Yeah. I first did one of those. And he'd seen a video I did. He goes, I have this idea for this thing. Well,
go ahead. We're clear, I want to make sure, because the audience is clear, is you'd written a book on what it is to date women overseas, right?
Correct.
Is that correct? And it was how you met these women, and he got curious about that, because I know so many men are the passport bro thing's going crazy, right? And how do I meet an awesome wife?
Because there's so many scams out there, and people get ripped off all the time. And I truly believe in the authenticity of real good cultures. If you get past the tourism and past the other thing, and you can, like, you ask anybody who actually lived over there. I mean, at this point in my life, I've lived in Puerto Vallarta. I've brought 6 months of my life in Bangkok, 8 years of my life in Mykolaiv, Ukraine. You've lived in Bucharest. And once you get past the tourism and the scammers and everything, you get some people who just live there. These are beautiful people in beautiful countries of the world, and we come away with a lot of respect for their work ethic, for their values, and we wanted to share that. And I was really tired of everybody just having a negative impression of what it would be to do this, and I get it, because there are bad stories. So I'd written the book. Anyway, he wanted to do a documentary to show how it could be done, and then he developed cancer, and so he had to go in for some surgery. But along the way, what he'd set me up to do, he tricked me in a way, because he says, like, what we're going to do is actually get some guys to come and do this. So we're going to set up a weekly webinar where you're going to do that, and I'll teach you email marketing. We'll build you a website. And I'm going, I thought we were doing a documentary. He goes, yeah, but we got to build you up in your story, and then we're going to get guys who want to pay to come on this thing. And at the time, it was like,
so when you say come on this thing, do you mean like
a tour?
We were going to
create we're going to create a tour and film it.
Okay.
And so I didn't realize we were going to do this grassroots thing.
So he had this idea of we're going to go get these guys all married up.
Yeah.
You're like,
we're going to film it, but it's going to be the work. I'm going to have to go recruit the guys. Yeah. But the truth is, I was so down after losing everything, and it was nice that somebody believed in me. And so every week, and I'd been in men's work before, just in churches, men's ministries and things. And so it was nice to teach these guys. And of course, by then I'd had enough experience in marketing and business, and now I dated internationally. So I had a few things to offer guys. And so we would get on these things, and every week I'd do a PowerPoint and I'd teach them. And I was getting 80, 100 guys, a week on a webinar. It's not outstanding, but it was actually cool, and it was a good energy to it. There's something pure about it, and the guys really wanted to grow and learn. I had another side story that's in the book. I'd lost a whole bunch of weight. I used to look like Homer Simpson. I was 250 pounds as a 2'8" man.
I saw those pictures.
Yeah.
You look like a different guy.
Facebook didn't even recognize it. I posted a picture before and after, and they couldn't identify the other guy. So, so I was teaching. Some guys lost 100 pounds, and I had people who got the courage to, do their side hustle business, and it was infectious. It was addicting to me in a new way. I hadn't experienced that before, where it's like, at least I'd learned something by that in life that I could help somebody else with. And so it fed me. And so even though there wasn't money in it or anything at that point, it was just so encouraging to have something I knew that there was somebody benefiting from all the pain and sorrow and the loss and the successes. So that's kind of where I was circa 2011.
So you had your big real estate crash, lost everything, and came back with this this new business that grew itself out of nowhere.
Correct.
Right? And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that story. Right.
Yeah. First, I think I had 11 people I emailed to say, "Would you, get on my email list?" I mean, it was that small at the beginning.
But was there a part of you? I always get curious about this, because I've heard this story many times in a different form, right? Like I have this story where I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I'm lost. I'm stuck. Yeah. And then somehow you're funneled or forced into something that suddenly becomes your new thing.
Correct.
It's like when I became a hypnotist, right? I'd studied hypnosis for a year, and I didn't want to be a hypnotist. I just wanted to understand how the mind worked.
Yeah.
And I had quit everything. I quit my job, lost another job, was sitting in my bedroom, broke, figuring out how to pay the rent. Had roommates, and they wanted me to pay the rent. I just didn't know what to do, and I started praying. I was like, I don't know what to do. And that was that first time I ever really prayed, where I felt the surrender happen. Yeah. And when that surrender happened, there was a message in my head, very clear message. It said, go on Craigslist, go to this section of Craigslist, and basically look right here, and there's what you're supposed to do is be waiting for you there.
Wow.
And I went, and the first thing in that section was hypnotist.
Wow.
I needed a weight loss clinic. And I'm like, no. I said I'd never practice this. I have a certificate. I'll never practice this. And I called it up, and they're like, yeah, we need somebody now. We want to hire you. Oh, my God, you got a certificate from that school. That's a great school. And I was like, oh, this is getting just weird. And I tried to resist for a month. I said no, until, it's a long story short, I had nothing left, but I needed money. I called him up, and I ended up hating the job for 2 weeks more than any job I'd ever had. And by the end of 2 weeks, I loved it more than any job I ever had. Wow. And that's why I'm here where I'm at today.
That's so cool.
And it sounds like you had that moment where you lost everything and got moved in a new direction.
I did. And it wasn't an easy transition, because, I can look back, you could look back and see the markers, especially with the coaching we do, and see where you were and see how much, what it took for ego to die, especially when I just fattened my ego during the 2000s. It was just, I was just everything. So everybody was envious of me, which felt so good. I had all this stuff, right? travel, all these amazing things, and then lose it all, and then move to another city where nobody knew me, and then I wasn't hearing the every day you have a cool car, a cool wife, whatever, right? So I wasn't hearing all this cool stuff, but I had this opportunity to work at Paramount. So there's some ego food. All right, something cool. A friend of mine had an office in an independent film company. He paid me $500 for every, basically, it's called a treatment, but a business plan for an indie movie that I wrote, and there wasn't enough work there to make a living. So my wife is waiting tables, and then I had this little thing with Rick where we'd started doing these weekly webinars. And I remember about a couple years into it, because we had some success. So guys came out. We ended up making a regular business instead of just a one-time documentary, which we filmed, but it never got really published. But it created a business. People were paying $5,000 each to come onto these week-long experiences we created with these dinner events and all this stuff. We started creating marriages, and we were focused on that, and it was really encouraging. So a couple years into it, the income on that started to grow as guys wanted to do that, and I wasn't making money at Paramount. And it's so ironic the way you think you're going to go one way. I wanted to be in the movie business. I wanted to make movies. Here we are, we're rubbing shoulders going like, we just saw, my buddy working with me, he goes, I was at the gym at the studio this morning and I'm working out with Brad Pitt, and later he got a job at Plan B Studios, which is Angelina's studio. So we had all these connections, and it was just such a ride. There's no money in it, but it was feeding my ego. I'm in movies, right? And we wrote all these scripts, had all these stories, and none of that worked out. Well, on the other side, this little thing where I'm once a week doing a little webinar, and guys were being changed, and some guys were paying to come over on these tours with us. And I remember on my 50th birthday that I sat down in front of the camera, in front of the guys for the webinar. I said, guys, instead of teaching, I got to tell you something. I'm hurting. This has been a very difficult journey for me. I don't know what's coming. I don't know where I'm going. But I just want to ask if there's anything over these last couple of years I've been doing these webinars that's benefited your life, would you mind just chiming in? And, kind of like we did on Zoom, you could unmute them and they would talk or they would type in the chat. And it changed my life. An hour and a half, these guys went on and on about, because of you, I lost 100 pounds. I got my relationship back with my wife together because you. My business started turning around. You gave me these tips, and I had the courage to venture out, and my side hustle's now my main thing. I was able to quit my job, and they just went on and on and on. And I had no idea. And it blew me away. I was like, and then they went on my website after an hour and a half of that, and there was 88 other comments and posts about things guys have benefited from. And I was like, I don't know what this is, man, but I want this. I want this feeling. It's better than cars or houses, and it's not that I'm making any money on it, but it's like, wow, I really did something. And they're the ones telling me. I'm not making it up. It's not a sales pitch. I don't have these testimonials anywhere else. And to have people thank you for changing your life, once you get that, it's like your entire framework changes. And we'll get into legacy in the book later, but what I truly believe is there's a way everybody can do that and have that kind of impact and receive those kinds of thank yous and those accolades, because everybody touches people in a different way. But once I got there, there was no going back. I just wanted to serve, and it led, of course, into the work we did for the orphans and the nonprofit. It just, your heart explodes and comes out in a different way. And then truly, like we said before, it becomes not about the money anymore. It's this feeling. I want to know that there's somebody out there who appreciates what I'm doing. I want to know there's somebody out there that I'm able to make a difference with. And I, like you said, I've had, Russia invaded, had another crash, built something more back. And so I do want to talk about that later, because you asked me beforehand, let's talk about work and how to keep your attitude momentum, whether you're high or low. Is this one of the things I've had to learn? And we have enough experience in life as entrepreneurs that even when you have a low, you've been down this path before, you'll have a high again. So how can you learn to enjoy the richness of life even when it's low, and to understand what you're looking for is a different quality? I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's that was what changed my entire focus around from
Well,
materialism and all the ego stuff.
do you personally believe, because that was a beautiful story, it's a beautiful transition, and I have seen this time and time again, the same thing when I tried to resist the hypnosis job and go into the film industry myself,
Sure.
right? And of course, that fell flat on my face, and I ended up crawling back to the hypnosis job.
Yeah,
And that,
yeah.
you know, and I feel like there is a purpose that everybody is designed to have, right?
Yeah.
I went to church the other day. I love to go to church on
Yeah.
Sundays. So there's this great church here with this great pastor, and he was talking about purpose. He was talking about how we all have purpose, and we all have a purpose that's designed to come out of us. If you look at Gay Hendricks' work, we all have an upper limit, a zone of genius. There's a zone of excellence, which we all have a big zone of excellence. With our zone of genius is right here.
Yeah.
And I think, and I want to hear what you think. Do you think that there is consciousness, God, for whatever term you want to use, source, that's always trying to guide you to that zone, the zone of genius you came here to give to the world? Because it seems like that's what happened to both of us. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, absolutely. In fact, chapter 14 of the book is called The Eternal You. And I think I've been given enough understanding from, and I'll say the source of all that is, creator of all that is. Absolutely. There is one entity, and more than just saying he's the universe, he's very intimately aware, more of me than even I know. He knows what I need and what I want, and he can adjust with my mistakes and whatever else along the way to make something great out of it. And there's a potential in us that truly is unlimited. I mean, the world is yet to see what one person could do if they could truly open their heart and let that purity of wisdom and knowledge flow out, with love and purpose and intent. But the more you understand that, what was it Pierre Chardin said 150 years ago, we are not physical beings having spiritual experiences, but spiritual beings having a human experience. And I know that as certainty, absolute certainty. And I could get into whole kinds of conversations to prove people, they know they have a spirit, and you've sensed it before. And I give examples about how you felt that way. So if you have a spirit and you're connected to all of this, we're the ones who are stuck not being able to read it. And we know it. You know in your instinct, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Well, how did you know? And so the more we're able to relax and let go and let spirit flow and let this wisdom and this care and this loving source of all that is, I think even the word God is too small because we box it into, I know what God is. If you can define it in your head, it's too small. Mm-hmm. What was the Tao Te Ching said? The Tao that can be named is not the Tao. Yeah. Right? It's like, no, you got that wrong. So for me, to understand that everything in this moment, if you can first start with the premise of that, it's exactly as it ought to be. And I think we find a lot of resistance to everything coming our way to think like, this is not right, I have to get out of it, I'm uncomfortable until it changes. And so as an entrepreneur, where I've gone through the highs and lows, and I've had the struggle and the setback, and when I'm in the valley to realize this is, this truth, this part is actually going to be the most powerful part of my story than the highs. When I share the stories of my pain, my second spouse passing away, the bankruptcy, the loss, the struggle, the discovery of what was important that had to do with money, those are the things everybody resonates with. Not like, let me tell you when I had my Mercedes, the car was down, like this, and I had, so to me, it's like, how can we understand it and be in the moment and say, you know what, this is exactly the way it's supposed to be for some reason. It's not forever, and it's okay. And today I will find peace and meaning, and just turn to Creator and just say, what are we going to do today with a spirit of play and creativity? And know that, everything works out. It always has before, and it will.
Well, there's so much, people have a hard time understanding this when they're early on in their spiritual journey, but there's so much beauty and love in the suffering. And ultimately, you come to that realization what suffering is optional, but pain is inevitable. Hopefully I didn't get that backwards, but you get the basic idea. Yeah. When you stop trying to change reality gives you so many gifts. Okay, I don't have any money right now, great. I lost all my money right now, great. It's like the lesson both me and you got this lesson
Yeah.
when we had money in a fund, the credit card fund. We
Yep.
were making this nice passive income, and it was
Yep.
so much fun. And one day, the owner of the credit card fund decided to start embezzling. Then he got caught. Then he killed himself, and the government seized all our money. And all that money, not only did our money that we invested get taken, but our monthly income stopped.
Correct.
You know, and I remember sitting there with you that first week, and we were both in a lot of pain. So let's go out and get a beer, get a drink, because I had 425,000 seized, and I thought to myself, if I can get my heart back open and laugh at this, I'm going to make massive growth in my spiritual journey and my ability to be happy under any circumstance. Yeah. And I did it. It took about 2 weeks, and I did it. And there was a point of, wow, money doesn't own me. I'm free. And we both have had to go through these experiences, these rough experiences. Yeah. But on the other side of that is so much peace, so much love, right?
Well, you come back to what's it all about?
Yeah.
What's it all about? That's where I would like to transition a little bit into the legacy story, because it tees up a little bit of that question.
Yeah.
And
the legacy story is the book you've just written.
Yeah.
So he just wrote a book on creating your legacy, and this is,
yep.
What are you leaving behind? And when you first wrote this book, I got to admit, I was thinking, well, my first thought is ego. Like, I'm leaving something behind for everybody. Like I got to leave Apple computers. Then I thought, no. When you get beyond that, legacy is about what you're leaving that's going to help the world. Are you leaving something to help the world, whether they know your name or not, in my opinion? And so, continue on. I wanted to tee that up a little bit.
No, that's great. So legacy is the subtitle is Live with Purpose, Find Fulfillment, and Be Remembered. And the first thing that I'd lived with the perception that legacy was irrelevant to most people, irrelevant to me. Real legacies were about for the elite, the rich, the famous, the inventors, the artists, sculptors, whatever the world. And it wasn't for regular people. But this is where I want to transition back to my story with Rick, because like I said, Rick had struggled with cancer, but came back. And I helped him find his wife, and he went and got her. They went and got this big ranch up in near Coeur d'Alene, Idaho,
That's beautiful.
And I loved him. And he and I traveled too. I went and saw him in Salt Lake and Denver and different places he was teaching. And we had a bond. He brought me back to speak at one of his groups. He had a thing called the Speaker Machine. He was teaching people how to make a career out of speaking so they could drop their day job and, have freedom. And so he wanted to teach them. He says, of all things I've done in my life, I'm most proud of this accomplishment with Marcum, because out of that come all these marriages and babies. I feel like I've touched the world and expanded it, And 2 days later, he calls me up and says, I got to tell you, this thing's coming back. I've got spurs growing up my spine. I got to go in for radiation treatment.
You wrote about this in your book.
Yeah, it's in the book. And he didn't make it. And it broke my heart because I loved him. And I'd spent so much time, we had invested something, we built something together. But the thing that really turned all of this on was the memorial service. They had a Zoom call, and so I get to listen. The thing went on 3 hours. I think I caught an hour and a half of it, and later I watched the replay. But again, it was kind of like the experience I had one by one. I had all these people I never knew. I didn't know them. I'd never met them, but they came on and just talked about how Rick he was such a dear person to them, and how he touched their life, and how he had helped them, and of course crazy stories of adventures, the stuff they did together, and he was just a real hoot. He was such a personality. He'd written a book which started the whole thing, and he was kind to everyone. And so after that, I'm thinking to myself, here's this guy. Prior to my knowing him, he worked for a major insurance company, occupied this little cubicle doing training, and was so frustrated because he didn't have any time for his daughter, his single dad. So he wrote this book, and it got picked up by a university professor, and she paid him to speak, and he was like, how can I do more of this? In a year later, he turned a whole career into that. So he could have time with her, and he just turned his life around. So I'm looking at it in his funeral. How did this guy go from being just a trainer at a major insurance company in a cubicle with no time for his daughter to clearly having created a legacy. And it just made me, what is legacy? How is this applied to this guy? What is this? And it just, it owned me, it gripped me, this concept. So I go through, and first of all, anybody out there will have a hilarious time if you Google what is legacy. You get these things about, it's money you pass on, or legacy software. It's so useless. How can I apply that, right? What can I do with that? You think about, are there living legacies? Who do you think of? First one came to mind was Morgan Freeman. Okay, he's got this great voice. He's made movies that touch me, maybe inspired me when I needed it. But it's like, where's the pattern that I can create a legacy from that? And so I went through this chase of trying to figure out where's the pattern. And I was like, there's got to be a way anybody can do this if Rick could do it. And finally, I just heard that still small voice say, look at memorial service and see if there's a pattern there. So I went back and, my second spouse, his, and then of course there's other famous people who passed. You can look at their memorial services. And I came down with these 5 things that people talk about. Obviously people are relationships, friends, how close they were. Those adventures. Surprisingly, everybody had adventure, crazy stories, experiences they did together. Obviously assets. People normally think about what they pass on, what they build, businesses or whatever. Creations. Whether they wrote a book, they had art, they built architecture, there's something they created that came out of them. And then expressions of kindness. And maybe it's not philanthropic work, maybe it's just at the right moment of time they gave the right encouragement to somebody that turned their life around, right? But those 5 things seem to be common. And most everything said in memorial service can be fit into those. And as I started putting that together, I looked at them, I rearranged the order, and it was so funny because my dad as a pastor would always outline messages, try to get everything to start with the same letter. So I'm looking at this going like, okay, how does that work? No, I can't get them in the same letter. And so I'm going, okay, it's people, experiences, assets, creations, expressions of kindness. And I'm going, wait. People, experiences, assets, creations, expressions of kindness, spells peace. And I'm going, okay, I got to write a book. The peace legacy formula. Because then I went backwards on it and started looking at everything. Does it apply? Does it work? And then I realized once you have a formula like that, can you break that down so every day you just do a little bit in those areas or one of those areas and see that compound? And that's what the book really breaks down, is the how-to of how anybody can truly just touch on any one of these 5 areas and let them grow. Because at the end of the day, like Maya Angelou said, it's not what you do, what you have, or even what you said, but it's about how you made people feel that they'll remember you for. And by doing these, you answer the most difficult question. It's like a legacy isn't something you can sell or build yourself. It's not self-promotion. It's not branding. Because the legacy is what somebody else will say about you when you're not there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I know Brian, he did that. Oh, man, this bro did this for me. He did it. We had this time together. So you have to be making investments of service into people so outside of your presence they're going to talk about the value you've added to their life. It's this what just gets me excited, because this whole thing, I break it down to like anybody can do this. And we had searched. There was not another book where I created a formula for doing this. But to me, I just turned the world around. Somebody coming in thinking they're going to build legacy for ego. I went this big thing, it's Coliseum named after me. At the end of the day, it's like not the Coliseum named after you. It's people who say, I love this guy or this woman because they added value to my life. And so you go, oh, it's about service. But it's not that hard, And so I created a daily planner, touching these things every day. And it compounds over time, but it shifts your mind to a whole different way of looking at the world. And I've got examples in the book how I made different decisions once I started seeing the world that way.
Interesting. So I'm kind of curious how your decisions changed. Before you tell me, I'm really curious about that. Can you say the 5 again?
Sure. People.
Experiences.
Assets. Creations. Expressions of kindness.
So what do you consider creations?
Oh, creations can be this podcast. There's content.
Okay.
There can be a book. It can be art. It can be architecture. Somebody designs architecture. It can be sculpting. It can be poetry. There's so many things that are just like, it's out of the creative element of the soul. They're expressed so many different ways.
Yeah. It's very interesting because I hear 4 of those really stand out as they are emotionally can impact people's lives in a way that where they'll remember you and love you and appreciate you. And then one of them can or cannot the assets, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. You have kids fight over it, right?
Yeah, right. It could impact your lives in a negative way, right? Some Scrooge type person leaves a ton of assets, and that's all he cared about was his money.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, now that you saw this in your life and you wrote it all down, how did you start making decisions differently?
The most recent and clearest one was to stay in Ukraine when the war happened.
This is interesting.
Now, I'd lived there for a long time.
I remember this happening. I remember distinctly. I was like, you should go. Nah, it'll be fine. And then next thing you know.
I told you so, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't that it was going to be fine. We did think so, honestly. The whole country, even civilians were not. They thought it was just noise because we'd been there, and we hear this every day. Russians are maneuvering again and all this kind of stuff, and we just thought it was going to be noise again. Until 5:30 in the morning, you wake up and you feel the ground shaking, this explosion, and you look out the window and there's the cloud of smoke coming out, and they blew up the airport. And you're like, holy cow, this is real. They really did it. And then we're like, what does this mean? What happens now? So I get dressed. I'm downstairs in my car. We go down to the office, and I start calling people to come in, and we got to figure this out. And of course, immediately the citizens didn't know either. So the first thing they got to do is they really wanted to stockpile. And it wasn't kind of as crazy as America when they'd stockpiled toilet paper. They're very courteous over there. There were 2-hour-long lines at grocery stores, though. People were lining up at the ATMs to get what cash they could. They drained all the gas stations within a week because everybody wanted to hold on. They didn't know when it'll get restocked. And of course, our first thought was, what about the orphanage? And we'd served 3 orphanages we were taking care of at the time. So we drove down there. We weren't getting anybody answering the phone. And they said, yeah, we're screwed.
So the orphanages was something you had on the side from your business. You were taking care of all these children.
Correct.
It was something you just felt you were driven to do.
Yeah, way back in 2012, we, just in our heart, we want to give back to the community. So what can we do to give back to the community? I had a 501c3 nonprofit called Abundance International, and originally I created it thinking I was going to do something else with it, and I go, oh, this is why, because it takes about 1.5 years to get those things approved. And so I already had it, and we started taking from customers and other people donations, and we built lots of things. We walk in, and the first time they're like, who are you? And, because they're not supported by these major organizations, just independent people and companies. So we built some trust, and they said, all right, if you really want to help us, and then we started bringing all kinds of supplies they weren't getting enough of. We built ICU units, birthing centers, training centers for Down syndrome kids. We did entire electrical, heating, roofing system in another place. So we'd been doing that, and every time we got to go in and play with the kids, and it was really a very heartwarming experience to be part of, honestly.
I could see that. If I was in there playing with the kids all the time, on one level I would love it, another level it would break my heart.
Yeah.
I would seeing these kids because I get touched with kids not getting love.
Yeah.
And so it's huge. And I'm sure these kids would bond with you. Oh my God, I could just imagine a kid hanging on to you and not wanting you to leave.
Yeah.
My God. So you're taking care of all these children. You've been doing it for a while. This war breaks out, and your first thought is the children. Yeah. So where'd you go from there?
Well, let me back up for a second, because you asked the question. It's like, how did this mindset change?
Yeah.
Because
that's where I thought the story was going.
Well, but the real decision, it is going there, but the real decision happened way before. So like 6 months earlier, I had people, in the know, the intelligence community, telling me this is not a joke, this is going to happen, and
I remember that, but you still didn't believe it. So do I have that correct?
But I didn't, but I had to take it seriously. So okay, what if?
Yeah.
Because they said they will go through your city because they want to march this direction. They find out you're American, you will not be treated well. They don't abide by the systems of war.
So I think it's Geneva Convention.
They don't. But I had this thought. I go, if I'm there, what if I left, right? And I'm back sitting on my couch watching on a big screen the news stories while my staff and people I love, this family associates are in there. I would rather die. That thought horrified me. The cowardice and the laziness that I would rather be there and die than then know that the people I love, I left them. Second thing was I had this longer term perspective where I said, I literally thought this every single day. I said, a year from now, and I would make the date in my head, I want to be able to look back and say I'm really proud of the way I conducted myself now. And that took me out of the terror of the moment to say, this moment will pass, this day will pass. There will be a time a year from now where I will be alive, I will be somewhere, and I want to look back and say, I'm really proud of myself the way I conducted myself. And the last one was I had to just believe that if I'm there, there's a reason. I was there for such a time as this, or something I'm supposed to do to help. And so that made me decide that even if these people are all correct, the Russians really do come in, I'm not going. There's something I'm supposed to do, and I want to be proud of myself later. So that's the answer. That whole mindset was the shift that took place because I started looking at the world under this legacy perspective.
You hadn't come up with the legacy perspective quite like in the book yet, right, at this time? So
I had done a lot of it because of Rick's passing, and he passed back in
So you kind of started
2014.
writing this book long before I even realized it.
No, I wrote the book later, but the thoughts were there. For instance, it was so for okay, here's the nitty-gritty of
So
the
you were
story.
unconsciously creating this framework.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I actually did this, and I didn't realize it. In 2016, I did it one of my weekly podcasts for New Year's. And I did it on how to create power planning for your future. And I did this model where I said, let's take a look at what's most commonly said in memorial services. And I had these 5 points. Now, I didn't have them in order. I didn't realize they spelled peace. You know, I had, in fact, one of them I think I had a different label for. But so when Nick, who's my editor, my, kind of my writing encourager and editor, he was saying, Mark, I've been going through your stuff. And he goes, I know what you're supposed to write. I go, what? He goes, you're supposed to write a legacy. I saw what you did there. You have a formula you don't even know. So somebody else saw it. That's the truth, right? And then as we got to writing the book, we'd started writing and we realized, oh my gosh, this spells peace if we do it this way. So it was like 2016 when I did the first talk on the 5 things people will say at your memorial service.
And boom, and then it went from there. So then you end up, so you got this piece, you got this thing together. It's kind of unconscious. You're kind of doing it, but it's not clear yet, but it's becoming conscious.
Right.
The war breaks out.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there in the war and you're like, I'm not leaving.
Right. I'd already decided that in advance.
And then so I do remember that you at some point you did leave. You got all the way out, and and this is the part that I thought was fascinating. You got all these supplies and money, and you went right back in.
Yeah.
And you went all the way back. And
correct.
And I remember asking you at the time, I'm like, this is crazy. And you were like full of life. You're like, I've got to get these supplies to these kids. It was almost like it doesn't matter what happens to me.
Absolutely.
And I remember you being asked, and I don't remember if I asked you or somebody else. I don't remember how this question came about, but why don't you just take the kids out of Ukraine? Why are you bringing all this money and supplies back to them? And I'll let you answer that question because I think that's huge. That when you answered that question, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking. This is coming up in the news a lot these days. This reason.
It was, and you're right. And in fact, I don't know if we connected in Bucharest one of the times when I was doing this, but I went in and out about 8 times, and I'd take somebody in there, and then I'd drive.
I didn't know it was that many. Wow.
I'd go to different parts. Then I'd go up to the northern part in Lviv, and I'd cross the border there. Then I'd come back, and then I'd go back in. And so we traveled all around. And right after the war started, the word got out that we were helping, and we got requests from 22 orphanages. So the demand got increased, incredibly. So there was a life to it. We were like, we're really doing some good. And I got pictures of all these orphanage directors with piles of food supplies we got from them thanking us. And it was really, honestly, I look back at it and you think about it, I watched a bomb go off in front of me, 2 kilometers away, about a mile away, where the Russians blew up this gas tanker, oil reserve thing. And when I was in Mykolaiv, where I lived, every night you'd hear artillery. You could hear the actual artillery, not just the bombs, the artillery, the actual gunfire. We were 45 minutes from the front line. Every day in every city were air raid sirens going off, and you're supposed to get in a bomb shelter and all these different kind of things. and I was fully alive. And I was fully alive because I go, when is this going to come again? When is this opportunity going to happen where I can actually do something that actually helps and makes a difference?
Really inspires. You really understand who you are when under pressure, don't you?
And you don't know how you're going to respond until you're actually in it.
Yeah, I noticed that with me with a few situations. You know, I do remember a friend getting beat up in a bar by a bunch of gangsters, and I always assumed I didn't know what I would act like, and I remember diving in there to try to save his life because the bottles and the chairs were coming down on him.
Wow.
And I was just shocked that I did that without thinking, and I was like, I never would have thought I would have done something like that, but I was happy that I did.
Yeah.
Now, but let's get back to you. So you're running back and forth 8 times behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
You're seeing all this destruction going on. You feel more alive than ever before. And I remember I'd asked you this earlier. Why didn't you just take the kids out?
Okay. There was a couple of problems with that. First of all, in the early days of the war, there was a panicked effort to just really, without any plan or scheme, just throw kids out. And the orphanages can't legally do it because they're supposed to be an exchange. You have to have somebody on the other side who will take literal legal responsibility for them. And a lot of the orphanages, a third of the kids are there because they're special needs. The parents didn't want a special needs kid. A third are teen pregnancies. A third are prison, dads in prison, moms drug out, whatever. So that's the assortment. So you can't just load kids on a bus and throw them somewhere. But at the first few weeks, it was happening. And there were literally 2,000 kids lost or unaccounted for at the border crossings. And so they had human trafficking issues. We had other things.
So literally, they were brought to the border and they just disappeared. Somebody took them.
Somebody took them.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like you can't just hand them over and think, oh, the Red Cross will pick them up. It's like, I think they're busy. And unless you prearrange special care, nursing arrangements, and everything else, some did. There was a German medical operation that made arrangement for some of the kids, but it was a very small number. And the number of orphans in Ukraine was in the 20,000s.
So how many you said in the first weeks, 2,000 children disappeared?
Yeah, they weren't orphan kids. Those are just kids.
Kids in general.
Yeah.
Kids that in a weird sort of way became orphans because of the war.
Yeah.
Not in a weird, the literal sort of way. Yeah.
So we understood that our role is if there's disrupted food supplies, if there's disrupted medical, we got to find the sources, and we ended up setting it up so whatever they weren't getting supplied either from the government or from local sources, we found ways that we could have them delivered from nearby, because it's too much to try to get it across the border and go through customs, and then by the time you get there, then how do you divide it and send it across the country? So we had to set it up so we could find sources near there. And one of the most interesting stories was in Kherson, because if you know the history, for 8 months, they were under Russian control. And there were 5 orphanages in the Kherson.
These orphanages you were taking care of?
We were taking care of one of them, but we immediately got involved with all of them because we were asked. Very, very difficult stories. One of the orphanages, the Russians came in and took the kids, took them into Russia. And when we heard that happened, immediately we disbanded the others into homes. We found foster care homes. And so we shifted. The problem was also, since the Russians are controlling the area, a lot of the grocery stores are ransacked. We couldn't get all the medical supplies. So we had to create our own underground network of food supplies and pharmaceuticals, even coming from Crimea. This is sort of like a movie stuff. It was under the radar, under their nose. And we were repackaging it. I get pictures of these things where we had all these different packages. We were sending them with the homes to the families that were going to take care of these kids. Every month we're sending them a package, of here. And some of these families took in, a lot of them took 1 or 2 kids. Some of them took in 7 kids from the orphanage, and they said, we'll take them here, because then we were so delighted that the Russians came into this one orphanage to get the kids, and there's no kids there. And they're like, where are the kids? They're going, I don't know,
But then these families are taking in all these kids, and you're supplying them food and medical supplies and all this stuff. My God.
Still to this day.
Still operating.
Yeah, we still have donors. obviously we had a huge influx at the beginning because when something's
I
fresh,
remember
in
you
the
were all
news,
over the
everybody
news.
gives. Yeah.
You were being interviewed, right?
Yeah, I got interviewed, and I was the flavor of the day for a couple of weeks. I'm an American in Ukraine when the war first started, and so we do what we could during the day, and then from about 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., which was American prime time, I'd be on some news show I was on most of the Fox shows, CNN, BBC, MSN, all these different shows.
Yeah, when that first started, everybody was all up in arms, and now it's almost forgotten.
It's sad, and the needs haven't changed.
Yeah,
we did get there's good news, bad news in Kherson. They did recapture the city, so we had a little more control. But one of the baby house orphanages, they did get them, and we don't know where they are. The first group of 16 that were captured, we had the story of an off-duty CIA operative that created his own private little rescue mission. He got him back.
Nice.
Yeah, there was a news story about it.
So,
again,
are those kids back in your care?
Those kids, they didn't bring them back in Ukraine at all, because the path. I mean, obviously, Russia controlled the area, so they could take Kherson right into sections of Russia. But then we couldn't take them back from Russia back through to Ukraine, so they were in Georgia, and they remained in safe care in Georgia.
Yeah, I was going to say, because there's no war in Georgia, that's much better. Yeah, that's good.
So there's some bright news that comes out of that.
Yeah,
the resilience of the people. Another thing we learn is, and this is where I encourage. Just go back full circle. You talked about, how you find resilience, right? How do you find resilience in hard times? How do you find, because life will have that. Every millionaire has had his made it, broke, made it again, right? So how do you do that? Where do you get that resilience? And if I can encourage people, it's in you already. The resilience is in there. Human nature wants to thrive no matter the circumstance. I was just back in Ukraine a few months ago, and the city where I was in, which I mentioned you, has had some of the buildings bombed tragically, hotels, different things that had no business being bombed. But the people have an inherent driving need to live as best as they can and adapt, because that's our nature. My favorite restaurant was reopened, doing great. The shops along the main street were reopened again, and people were buying. So they're trying, everybody wherever they are, even in the middle of, currency crashed, all these different things, they're happy people still trying to find the best. And they get criticized because they'll go out on the weekend and they'll go to their nightclubs, their favorite nightclubs on the weekends. And it's like, why criticize them? They're trying to still enjoy life. It's like, how do you do that when there are people in the front line dying? It's like, because it's our nature to thrive no matter what comes our way. We're inherently want to say, okay, if this is what's in front of me, how can I enjoy today? And I think if you start every day that way, how can I enjoy today? Whatever this day is, what can I do to enjoy today? And find some things to look forward to. That'll carry you. That'll carry you.
Yeah, that's so important. Everything I've heard you just say is probably if people really listen to it, is some of the most important advice that you've said during this whole podcast is hard times come, but they come for a reason sometimes, and it's literally these people are learning to connect and take care of each other better than they probably ever would have without the war. It sucks that the war came along, but by having that war, they're really learning to say, I'm going to show up in spite of tough times. I'm going to learn to be happy in spite of all this BS that's going on. It's crazy that some people literally believe that you shouldn't be happy while other people are suffering. I'm like, then we all just crash and suffer together. Well, okay, so we're all going to sit and suffer together. Somebody has got to rise up and say, hey, everybody, we can rise up together. Because if everybody starts rising up, it's going to eventually start to stop all this stuff, if we can get enough people to rise up in the level of consciousness. And that's huge. And so if you're going through this, let's say you're going through this crash for the first time in your life, like these people over there have been through hell many times over. They're used to it. They're like, you know what? It's just another day in the life for us, right? But let's say you're not used to it. You started your first business and you lose everything. You crash. You get in crypto. You lose all your money. You get in the stock market. You lose whatever it is. Yeah. And it's your first time having gotten bigger and having that fall. And what advice do you give to that person?
The advice is common sense, but it's hard to hear. What do they say? It's simple but not easy. And the simplicity is it won't rain every day. Winter will pass. There are seasons of life. And what I ironically find is the guys, when they hit their first crash, is usually somewhere in their 30s, early 40s, and it's devastating. And I'm sitting here looking at them because I'm 61 now. And I'm looking at them and going like, you have no idea how much life you have ahead. And you have no idea 5 years from now you're going to be killing it. You're going to be doing all this great stuff. And yet we get absorbed in the failure and the pain of the moment, and we think it'll never end. After my second spouse passed away, and I went through a depression. And to me, I'm a very optimistic person. So prior to that, I was sort of cynical and critical of people who went through depression. They should just be optimistic. And I didn't realize there are many psychological reasons for it. Mine was this, as my counselor called it, a death of a dream. You told yourself all your life you'd be an astronaut or whatever. You do all these things, and you end up with a very domestic life, caring for somebody, and then they died, and you're like, this is not the life I thought I was going to live. So your brain has to go through the same grieving process you would if you lost anything else or had anybody else die. It's like you have also had the death of a dream of what your life would be like, and you have to let the grieving cycles finish. So I learned depression is a very real thing. I learned advice I needed. He gave me that worked to help me survive it, get through it, and then be fully alive afterwards, which I'm grateful for. But to think in your 30s or 40s that this is just the end is so naive, and it's so short-sighted. And again, how many of these cycles have I been through in life? And I realize, and I'll probably go through another one, and it's okay, right? But we realize that's the juice of life is living. The juice of life is no matter what the circumstances, what can I find today? And your thing, your love is going for walks. You don't have to have money to go for a walk in nature and feel the energy of everything around you. You don't have to have money to enjoy the companionship and having a beer with a friend or spending time with a loved one. And we put so much pressure on this material success, we think, when it falls, that we think, I fell. And it's so not true. We think life is over. So let's imagine, here we are today. Truth be known, we'll probably live to 100. Those in their 40s now are going to live to 120, right? Because we see the science is coming. Yep. So let's say you're 40 and you live to 120. So how many years do you have left? 80?
Yeah.
You have 80 years left. Now, not only that, I'm going to say your first 20 years aren't your choice. You don't get to pick where you live. You don't get to pick school because your parents do, right? So it's not your control. So you've only had 20 years of life that you had any control over. And you got 80 years to come. This is a drop in the bucket. So when you start getting this big perspective and going like, you know what, it's okay. If I suck for a couple of years, if I get bankruptcy, if I have pain, if I have a loss with somebody, I will have others, and there'll be a totally different story that I'll be celebrating a few years from now, and it's okay.
Yeah. I remember losing, when we lost all that money in the credit card banking deal.
Yeah.
It was $425,000. I remember thinking, oh, this money's gone. This sucks. It took me a long time to save that money. And then I thought, is it going to change my day-to-day in any way, shape, or form? Well, no. I'm still going to drink the same coffee. I'm still going to live in the same house. I'm still going to drive the same car. I'm still going to ski the same mountain. I'm still going to... Is anything going to change other than the amount of money I have in the bank? And I thought to myself, no. And if it did, let's say I had to sell my house, which I ended up doing because I wanted to, but... does that still stop me from doing my favorite things? Enjoying my coffee, getting up in the morning, enjoying the sunrise, playing with the dogs at the dog park, hanging out with the people I love to hang out with. No, none of them are going to leave me, nothing. I was like, there's this idea that your whole life changes, but in reality, it didn't change a drop other than the number on a screen somewhere that I look at on occasion. And I laughed and I thought, why was I letting this one thing dictate my happiness so much? That's when I really got big into loving the mundane, because that's where life is really at. This moment, me and you sitting here just taking each other in, enjoying this moment is everything, right? Oh my God, when the podcast comes, no, it's right here, right now. Oh my God, when I get to Romania next month, no, it's right here. I'm in Austin right now. A month ago, I was looking forward to being in Austin. And then I'm going to sit in Austin the whole time thinking about being in Romania. You know, no, I'm going to enjoy my buddy Mark. We're going to have hookah later. That's going to be awesome.
And some steaks.
Yeah, and some steaks, right? I owe you a steak. And that's what really matters.
It's life.
And people, as you get older, that's wisdom when you start to realize that we could sit down, have a hookah, have a cigar, and that's the real purpose of life, is me and you letting each other in and just enjoying this moment together.
100%.
Yeah. I love this stuff. I could talk about it all day. Continuing on, we had a little break for a moment, but continuing on, we talked a little bit about legacy. We talked about Abundance International. For people that are interested in legacy, can you talk a little bit about where they can find your book? I know it's in Barnes & Noble now, right? It's
everywhere. I mean, literally, if you go to Walmart.com, you go to Amazon, every place in the world has it, which I'm really pleased. I went with the New York publisher so I could have that exposure. And what I really love is first of all, regarding legacy, we're in the book. I created some free things just because I want to help people in their journey. So if you go to my name, marcumdavis.com, and get the book.
M-A-R-C-U-M.
marcumdavis.com. There is a place to get on my list, and you buy the book from the links are all there, anywhere you want. And then once you're on the list, I have a couple of really cool tools I just think are so helpful. And first of all is I'm going to be coming out with a daily planner. Like I said, there's a way, like I want people to implement this in their life. It changes their lifestyle, changes their focus. And so there's a free template you can download until I get the printed book, actual daily planner ready for sale and delivery. You can go get the template right now. There's also a 20-minute video on morning rituals for legacy makers. And then a 7-part video series I did in studio, which is 7 days to make your mark on the world. And all of that I just give for free because I want to get people started. As I grow in exposure and time, we're going to be doing masterminds. We're going to be doing really wonderful things to help everybody actually create and deliver their own legacy for themselves and create their own legacy formula. AbundanceInternational.org is the work we're doing in Ukraine. Donations there are tax deductible. And I've set it up so everything, wherever the book is sold, all the author royalties are going to Abundance International. I want to keep that fueled and going and keep that work alive. But to me, you could feel the energy in this. And I love you, brother. You know me a long time, right? This is something that I really believe I'll be doing the rest of my life. I think this has legs. I think this has depth. I think it's timeless. And I think it'll make a consciousness shift in the world the more people get focused on wanting to find out what's in them to make an impact that is remembered, their mark in the world that can't be erased.
Well, this is very important. What you just said, I think about all the time. I think about how can we get a nation or global set of leaders that really do want to help people, because I don't believe that's the case right now. Right. I believe most people get into politics and get into high levels of leadership because they're greedy. I don't believe any of those people are happy, and I think they can't stop doing what they're doing, making backroom deals and doing a bunch of stuff because they don't. Their legacy is nothing, right? Everybody knows they're full of shit. Most of these people that are doing this, but they can't stop doing what they're doing because they'll be miserable if they stop. They can't. They have to keep hustling and keep working and keep pushing. When we get a nation of leaders, and I think it's common, that really care about everybody, that really want to see their nation take off, their country, whatever, that people around them grow and help other people grow, and they genuinely are holding that intention in mind, everything's going to change. And with the consciousness growing on the planet right now, with all the things that are falling apart right now, that just tells you consciousness is growing. It's a polarity response, right? They're both growing at once. And when consciousness wins, because it will, that's my belief, it will, we're going to need more leaders like that, because that's what's going to change everything. Lester Levinson said, the only way to change everything is consciousness. You got to raise consciousness. With all this coming up with new policies without raising consciousness, debating over how things should be done without raising consciousness is not going to do anything in the end. Right. So definitely get Marcum's new book, Legacy. Check it out. Get on his list so you can find out about the classes and the trainings you're going to and Abundance International. I'm glad it's still going. I know it's not getting the donations it was.
Right.
I know out of sight, out of mind, but those orphans still really need the donations.
Thank you.
They need somebody like Marcum that's willing to go across enemy lines 8 times to get them to get them what they need. It's crazy. And I know you just went back recently too, right? I want to thank you for being here. What I want to ask you before we end all this today, and we'll do this again. Maybe we'll do it with hookah next time.
Yeah,
because we love our hookah together.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll just be mine and your thing when you come in. But what I want to ask you is, in your mind as a legacy maker, can you define what abundance and success is for you, and how do you look at the word abundance? How do you look at the word success today?
Thank you for asking that. I feel that abundance, first of all, is something that we all already have. And success, all those things are in us. Like I said, I believe that we are spirit beings. And in saying that, all the wisdom, all the knowledge of the universe, the power that comes through that, every resource we need to accomplish what we're here to do, vibrating out of us, we're the ones in the way. I say in the introduction of the book this way, I say, your legacy has already been put in you. We're the ones in the way of letting it out. And part of that is because we fight to feed our own egos. I want this, and I don't want you to take that away from me. And then we realize what really is fulfilling and makes a difference is something that flows more easily and comes out of us. And we have to, it's one of those things, the more you let go, the more you expand and experience something beautiful. It's a very interesting question, because to me in the past, success would have meant money. It would have meant possessions. It would have meant status. It would have meant ego. And yet, I just went through this period after my, third time to lose everything, right? But with enough wisdom and perspective to when the morning wakes up and I feel the panic, oh my gosh, what's going on? I go, wait, do we have food in the fridge? Are the bills paid? Is there a little money still in the bank? Is there gas in the car? Then what is going to be good about this day? And it didn't mean all the challenges went away, but gratitude is a magic formula. If I were to say, you let me think out loud, thank you. I'm circling the mountain, trying to land this plane. If I was to come about and say, what is abundance and success? At the end of the day, it's maintaining a spirit of gratitude. And I say this because what I've learned in myself is I used to be obsessed with fears, panic, overwhelm, and it would wake me up in the middle of the night. And you remember stories, I'd go, I can't help it. Every night, 4 a.m., I'm awake, and it takes me an hour to get back to sleep, remember? Mm-hmm. And what I've learned to shift is to abundance, because here's my theory, and this has been my experience. Abundance is the antidote for fear. It's the exact opposite. Because what is fear? It's the misuse of imagination that gets neurologically wired from our amygdala through our body and our nervous system. Fear owns us, and we obsess with intense emotions over fear. The counter is not optimism. It's gratitude. In the same intensity, to be able to go, bro, look at this, man. You and I, you know what we've been through for 10 years? And we're sitting here together doing this show. I mean, look at what we've been able to do. Look at the guys we've touched. And look at where we've traveled to. Look, we're alive today. We're healthy. And we look the same as we did 10 years ago. We're just good-looking guys, and I'm so grateful for your love and your friendship, and I'm grateful for how we've been there for each other. I love that I'm here, that you're close again, and we have one more chance to get together in another place and do fun, cool stuff together. I remember we were just in Bozeman shooting pool, looking out the window at the snow-capped mountains. I'm so grateful for your love and your friendship. I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I allowed creation to come from me to create this book. And so many of it, I just feel wasn't even me, but it was like other people noticed these things, and they helped me to write, bring it out. I'm grateful for, the studio, and to find out the history. It's like I know some of the people who've been here, and I'm grateful for so many things. I'm grateful for this little car I get to drive, and since coming back from Ukraine, I haven't bought a house. I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment. But God, I love that little place. Every morning I wake up, I get to see the sunrise coming over the hills. And the more I can grasp with the same emotional intensity, gratitude, that is success. That is abundance. And it will open you up to lead to everything else you want. And it's the antidote to fear. That's my answer.
Well, thank you, Marcum.
I've gone by there all my life. It's all good.
Sometimes I want to call you Mark.
You can call me Mark all you want.
Yeah, Marcum. Love having you here, brother. Excuse me. Love having you here, brother. And I look forward to having you back. Next time we'll have some hookah.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll have a cigar, some hookah. Who knows? We'll figure it out. And I think I still don't have anything I could close my show on yet. I haven't come up with a slogan yet. We'll figure it out. I'm going to talk to you.
Ooh, yeah, let's do that tonight.
Hookah. We're going to figure out what I'm going to be saying on camera in the future.
We got that.
And so
I'll come up with your tagline.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
He's a branding guy, so also.
I love it.
So, but yeah, thank you for being here, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Have a beautiful day.